All right, so we're diving into this pretty shocking case today, the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. You sent over a bunch of articles and some stuff from social media, so let's try to piece together what we know.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? How this case kind of brings together corporate power, like you said, individual grievance, and of course, social media is always there.
Right, that entrepreneur.com article, it really lays out the basics. Thompson shot, broad daylight, Midtown Manhattan,
Not exactly subtle.
not at all. The NYPD commissioner called it brazen and targeted, no less.
And a targeted attack like this against a healthcare CEO, it raises some big questions right off the bat. Like, who would even target someone like that? And why? This isn't your average crime, so the motives are going to be different.
Exactly. And that brings us to the suspect, Luigi Mangione, 26 years old, and he was arrested under some pretty strange circumstances.
Oh, yeah. Found acting suspicious at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's almost too weird to believe.
It's like out of a movie, right? But it gets even weirder. Mangione had a fake New Jersey ID and the name on it, same one used at a Manhattan hostel. And guess what? That's where the alleged shooter stayed last month.
A fake ID. I mean, that really suggests some planning, like he was trying to cover his tracks, make it harder to link him back to the crime.
And to add to all this, he was also found with a gun and a suppressor.
Ah, now a suppressor, for those who might not know, is basically something you attach to a gun to make it quieter. And that's significant, right? Because it means whoever shot Thompson didn't want to attract attention. More evidence that this was planned.
So we've got a targeted attack, fake ID, a weapon designed for stealth. This is looking less and less like some random act and more like a well-orchestrated plan.
Exactly. But then there's another piece to this puzzle, and it adds a whole new layer to this story. They found a 3-page handwritten note on Manjune.
Oh yeah, the note. Even before we get into the specifics,
Yeah.
just the fact that someone sat down and wrote a 3-page note in this day and age, that's fascinating in itself.
Yeah.
It makes you think maybe he felt the need to explain himself, to justify what he did, or even just, to be understood.
Absolutely. And some of the phrases that have been leaked, they're pretty disturbing. Like, these parasites had it coming. Just that line alone is chilling. It's not just anger, it's dehumanizing language. No empathy for the victim whatsoever.
Yeah, parasites. It's like he's seeing Thompson and maybe others in the healthcare industry as something that needs to be eradicated, like a pest or something.
And CNN is reporting another line from the note. I do apologize for any strife and trauma, but it had to be done. Apologizing, but then saying it was necessary. It's like he truly believes what he did was justified.
It's almost like he's trying to paint himself as some kind of reluctant hero, forced to take drastic measures for the greater good. But that leads to a really important question. What could drive someone to do something like this? Especially someone like Mangione. We're talking about an Ivy League student here.
Yeah, that's what's so intriguing. He was an Ivy League student, smart guy. Privileged background, all the opportunities in the world. It's not the profile you'd expect for someone who resorts to violence.
So what went wrong? Was it some personal grudge? Did he just snap? Or could it be, like the note suggests, something deeper, some sort of resentment towards the whole healthcare industry?
I think we need to consider all the options. The American healthcare system is, well, it's a mess. Rising costs, people can't get the care they need, all the bureaucracy. It's definitely a recipe for frustration.
Yeah, but wouldn't someone from Mangione's background, with his education and probably good healthcare, be shielded from a lot of those issues? Maybe there's something more personal going on, something that really pushed him over the edge.
That's where his online presence comes in. It's key. The New York Post, they tweeted a photo of Mangione from, I think it was his Instagram. And apparently he has accounts on other platforms too, like X, the one that used to be Twitter.
Social media,
Right.
the echo chamber where people's frustrations can get amplified and ideas they can take a dark turn. So the question is, what was he looking at online? Could those online influences have shaped his worldview? And could they have been a factor in this whole thing?
That's what we need to figure out. What kind of content was he engaging with? Who was he following? Was he part of any online groups, communities, anything that might have espoused extremist views?
It's like we need to step into a digital world, to try and understand how he ended up at that McDonald's in Altoona with a gun and that 3-page note.
That's exactly where our deep dive really begins.
So we've established that Mangione, our Ivy League suspect, wasn't exactly off the grid. He had a digital footprint. And that means data, right? Clues we can maybe use. What have you found so far in his social media?
Well, let's start with that New York Post tweet you mentioned. just a picture of Mangione. But people are already all over it, analyzing everything, his expression, his clothes, the background. It's a reminder that this case is playing out online as much as it is in the courts.
Yeah, like he's become a character in some true crime drama, and everyone's trying to figure out his role. What about his other accounts? What was he posting, sharing?
His Instagram is, well, pretty normal. Pictures of food, trips, friends, typical, millennial stuff. But his X account, that's where things get interesting.
That's what I was thinking. Okay, tell me more. What'd you find on X?
He was following a lot of healthcare policy accounts, but not just the mainstream stuff. He was deep into, I guess you could say, the fringes, accounts pushing conspiracy theories about big pharma, insurance companies, the government.
Conspiracy theories. So we're talking about a worldview that's, well, distorted, a real sense of mistrust in institutions. Was he posting himself or just reading?
He retweeted sometimes, commented, and his language. Intense, accusing insurance companies of murdering people for profit, calling healthcare execs vampires, even hinting at radical action being necessary to change the system.
Wow. Those are some strong words. And it sounds like those online rants were mirrored in what he did offline, like he was bringing his digital anger into the real world.
Yeah, it's a scary trend, this blurring of what people say online and the violence we see offline. Social media, it's a platform, and not always for good. Extremist views can spread so easily, and sometimes that leads to real-world harm.
So we had this Ivy League student exposed to all these conspiracy theories, radical ideas online. It's painting a picture of someone who might have felt alienated, angry, convinced the system was rigged against him.
And feeling like that, violence might have seemed like the only answer, a way to lash out at the parasites he thought were responsible for everything wrong in the world.
But wait a minute. This is an Ivy League student we're talking about. Access to good health care, presumably. Doesn't that contradict the idea that it was systemic issues that pushed him to do this? Could be something more personal, some grudge we haven't found yet.
That's a great point. His online stuff points to anger at the healthcare industry, yeah. But it doesn't explain why Brian Thompson specifically. There could be something missing, a personal connection, an experience. That was the final push.
Exactly. Maybe Thompson denied him coverage for something, or maybe someone in his family suffered because of, I don't know, UnitedHealthcare policy or something. It's like we're missing that one piece that would make it all click into place.
And to find that piece, we might need to go deeper into Mangione's life, his family, relationships, any past issues with the healthcare system. There might be a clue somewhere in his background.
Okay, so we need to dig into his past. But while we do that, let's not forget the bigger picture. This case, it's more than just one guy's actions. It raises questions about healthcare in America and how social media shapes how we see the world.
Absolutely. This case could be a microcosm of bigger problems, a reflection of the disillusionment and anger so many people feel towards institutions, towards systems they think are broken and don't care about them.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
But it's one we have to face. If we want to prevent these kinds of tragedies in the future, we need to understand what drives them. It's hard to grasp, isn't it? That someone could be so angry, so disillusioned with the healthcare system that they'd resort to violence. But I think we need to talk about the company at the center of all this.
Yeah.
UnitedHealthcare. I mean, they're huge, right? One of the biggest players in the industry. Could their actions have played a role in what happened?
Yeah, it's a question worth asking for sure.
Yeah.
UnitedHealthcare, like a lot of big insurance companies, they haven't exactly been popular lately. They've had their share of controversies.
Right. Denying claims, jacking up premiums, people accusing them of putting profits before patients. Not exactly a good look.
And you have to remember, that note Mangione wrote, he called people like Thompson parasites. Makes you wonder if he saw UnitedHealthcare as this symbol of corporate greed, a system that's rigged against the average person.
I mean, we've seen this kind of sentiment before, haven't we? With Occupy Wall Street, the anger at the big banks, the tech giants. People feel like these corporations have too much power, that they're out of touch with everyday people's lives.
Absolutely. And when people feel exploited, ignored, it creates resentment, anger. And sometimes that anger can turn into something dangerous, like we saw in this case.
So while we can't condone what Mangione did, of course not, we can't ignore the context either. The American healthcare system, it's complicated to say the least. And for a lot of people, it feels like it's working against them.
And I think that's the real tragedy here. Whether Mangione was personally affected by UnitedHealthcare or not, his actions speak to a much wider feeling of of frustration, of despair
Yeah.
that many people feel about the whole healthcare system.
It's like he was trying to make a statement, right? As misguided and as violent as it was. A statement that things need to change.
And that message, sadly, was delivered in the worst way possible. But maybe, and this is a tough thing to say, but maybe Mangione's actions can be a wake-up call.
A wake-up call for who?
For everyone. For lawmakers, for the people running these companies, for all of us. We need to realize that the way things are, it's not working. We need to talk about real healthcare reform, about making these corporations accountable, about creating a system that's actually fair, equitable, and accessible to everyone.
It's a big challenge, but it's one we can't ignore. This case has shown us what can happen when we do, what that anger and despair can lead to.
And hopefully it can also push us to build a better future where healthcare is a right, not a privilege, and where these companies are held responsible for their actions.
Well, this has been a difficult deep dive, but an important one, I think. We've looked at a terrible event, talked about some really complex issues, and uncovered some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, and while there are no easy answers, I think the biggest takeaway is this. We have to keep asking questions, keep challenging the way things are, and keep working towards a better world.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, knowledge is power. And even when things seem dark, there's always hope for change.